Well, Dr. Peter Shaughnessy is a born and bred South Australian. For 50 years, he's studied the ecology of several seal species in Australia, South Africa, Namibia, Alaska, the sub-Antarctic islands of Macquarie and Heard, and on the Antarctic pack ice. His research fields have included distribution, abundance, and population trends of fur seals and sea lions, interactions between seals and fisheries, and interactions between seals and tourism. He worked at the CSIRO, Division of Wildlife and Ecology, until retiring in 2002. He's now an honorary research associate at the South Australian Museum and still actively harassing sea mammals and birds across the state and around the world. Please welcome my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Dr. Peter Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Jo. And this is fabulous to see so many people out here today. I'm really delighted. And thank you for inviting me along. Now, I'm going to tell you two little stories about our seal populations in South Australia. And the theme of this is that the hard data from our research on population numbers is quite different from the public perceptions of what's happening to these two seals. Now, the seals are the fur seal, the long-nosed, or also known as New Zealand fur seal, which is a native. And the fur seals are the ones with the pointy noses. And then the ones with the blunt noses, that's the Australian sea lion. And many of you will have seen Australian sea lions at Seal Bay on Kangaroo Island. Now, this research that I'm talking about, this research began when I was at CSIRO in Canberra. It started about 30 years ago. And I'm still dabbling along, but much of it now is done by a group at Sardie Aquatic Sciences at West Beach, led by Simon Goldsworth. So first of all, to the fur seal. We've followed fur seal numbers on Kangaroo Island, 2 colonies on Kangaroo Island, for 29 years at one of them, called Cape Ganthium, and for 24 years at another called Cape Takuti. And the fur seal numbers really took off when we started this work. And at Cape Ganthium, pup numbers, we estimate pup numbers every January, they've gone from 450 to 5,000. And for a while they were going up at 15% per annum. But in the last 5 years that has tailed off, and we think now that the numbers have stopped increasing. We've reached the maximum in those colonies. And that's the biggest colony there is in Australia. So in South Australia we have 100,000 of these fur seals based on a survey we did in January, February, March in 2015. And it looks like the numbers have probably reached their plateau. Now, because there are so many fur seals, they get a lot of bad publicity because they interact with fisheries, especially commercial fisheries, and also with recreational fisheries. And you'll hear talk that the numbers are exploding. Well, they were kind of exploding about 1990 when the numbers went up very rapidly. But no, they're not exploding anymore. So because of this careful research we've done for 29 years, we're able to advise the managers of the colonies, that's the South Australian Department of Environment, of exactly what's going on. And that's been very valuable for them. My second example is the Australian sea lion. And this story is not so good because the numbers of Australian sea lions are going down, and also they're not very abundant. All up in Australia, there are about 10,000 Australian sea lions. This is an Australian endemic species. It's considered as vulnerable and probably should be considered as endangered. 85% of that 10,000 estimate are all in South Australia. And the biggest colonies are at Kangaroo Island, at Seal Bay, at the Pages Islands, which you see on the ferry when you go across to Seal Bay, if you know where to look, and a little place off Port Lincoln called Dangerous Reef. Now, we've been following pup numbers of Australian sea lions at Seal Bay on Kangaroo Island for 22 breeding seasons. These animals breed every 18 months for some obscure reason, which we would love somebody to research. And the numbers there have gone down at about 1.3% per annum. Now that's not a lot, but over a long period of time, the numbers are certainly declining. The numbers of pups born there last breeding season was about 250. So there's still a good sized colony there, but it is quietly disappearing. And I should add that sea lions underpin an important tourism industry on Kangaroo Island. Nearly all of the visitors that go to Kangaroo Island go to Seal Bay, and Seal Bay gets 100,000 visitors per year. And this decrease is not only at Seal Bay, it's also on other islands that we've been following, other colonies we've been following. One, for instance, off Streaky Bay called Olive Island. The numbers there have been going down over 7 breeding seasons. They've been going down at 4.4% per annum, so that's quite a serious rate of decline. Why? Why is this? Both the first seal and the sea lion were harvested before settlement in South Australia. Seal harvesting was our first industry. Not anymore. But the first seal has recovered from that harvesting, but the sea lion certainly hasn't. But I think in the case of the sea lion, we believe that the problem is they get entangled in the nets of commercial shark fishermen. And there have been steps taken to reduce that mortality. The fishery is managed by the Australian Fisheries Management Authority in Canberra, because most of the fishery is actually in Commonwealth waters. And we managed to convince them to put observers on the boats, and they found that yes, sea lions do get caught in the nets, come up entangled, drowned. And so now they have taken a lot of steps. Between 2010 and 2012, they introduced these measures. There are now cameras on all the boats to record numbers. If they catch too many, an area is closed for 18 months. And they have no-go zones around every sea lion colony in South Australia of up to 18 kilometres, which is wonderful. And the boats have satellite trackers on them, so the Fisheries Management Authority knows where the boats are all the time. It's real Big Brother stuff. So we applaud them for bringing in these measures. Now, the sea lion population should increase, but so far it hasn't been increasing. And one of the animal's problems is that the mothers don't have their first pup until they're aged 6, and these measures have only been going for less than 6 years. And we know this from work at Kangaroo Island, where they put microchips in the backs of every pup once it gets to a big enough size, and then they can follow them with a reader and know when they have their first pups. So that population should start to increase, but unless we have the funding to go out and monitor these colonies, we won't know whether these animals are increasing or not. So doesn't seem to be any public perception that these animals are declining, but in fact they are. So in one case, the fur seals are going up, but the sea lions are going down. Very mixed fortunes for our 2 seal species. So I'll leave you with that little message, and thank you very much.